Okay, so in this video, I'm going to walk you through rolling out FunnelFlux using Launchpal. So Launchpal is one of our partners that makes the deployment process very, very easy. So if you're wondering why you'd want to use Launchpal versus, say, our Vultr script for automated installation, well, it comes down to the extra benefits that Launchpal provides. So in terms of pricing, Launchpal charges you $1 per day per project that you have running. So you can use it to deploy projects and then remove the projects and test things and so on without too much overhead. But ultimately, it's a service that automates and streamlines a lot of the aspects about managing servers and applications. So create a Launchpal account and go to create a new project. And here you'll be able to see the various applications they can deploy. Landing page server is very useful if you just want to deploy separate VPS for hosting landing pages. That virtual private server ideally is a different server to what your FunnelFlux tracker is running on. So this makes it very easy to roll that out, ready to host landing pages without too much overhead. You can roll out FunnelFlux, their product, no IP fraud, Prosper 202, and so on. So it makes deploying these very, very easy, and there's a number of different features that I'll point out along the way that really make Launchpal a nice platform to actually work with. Okay, so what are you going to need to get started? First off, you're going to need a license key. I have mine here. You're going to need a Launchpal account. Remember, you can use our coupon on the tutorial page for your first month to make it basically free. You're going to need a virtual private server provider like Vultr in this example, and you're actually also going to want a domain that you will point to your tracker that you can let Launchpal take over in terms of DNS management. So typically I would advise using Cloudflare, but for Launchpal it's going to be easier if you actually associate a domain with their system so that they can control the domains there. Okay, so for the domain, I'm going to use this domain here, xenotestdomain.online, and I'll come back to configuring this in a moment. So on Launchpal, click on New Project. I'm just going to use the automatic name that it comes up with. Pick FunnelFlux. Note here the version is probably below the current version, so one of the first things we're going to want to do when we install FunnelFlux is update it. Okay, so click Next. Pick your provider. I'm going to pick Vultr. Note when you use Vultr, I believe you need to have some prepaid credit on the account. So if you go to Vultr and you go to billing, you can enable like the credit system or add some actual credit to your account or something like that. And that way the project will deploy properly. So if you just have a credit card attached for monthly billing, it doesn't seem to work. There doesn't seem to be a limitation on the other ones. Not sure why it's like that on Vultr, but if you try to launch a project and it says the project encountered an error and you don't see a virtual private server spawn here, then that's probably why. Okay, so I'm just going to pick Frankfurt. For the size, pick 2 vCPU, 4 gigabytes of RAM. This is the minimum recommended specs for FunnelFlux. So if you go below that, well, it's your problem if you encounter issues because that's below the minimum recommendations. Click Next. So this is one of the cool features of Launchpal, which I really, really like. I think it saves time and it's easy, especially if you use Dropbox like I do. So what you can do is choose to sync with Dropbox. In your Dropbox account, which it will attach when you go through this if you haven't already done so, it'll make a Launchpal folder inside the apps folder and then a folder with your project name. And then that is like the web directory for your actual server. So if you're using the server just for delivering landing pages, it means you can put everything in that Dropbox folder. You don't have to log into an FTP client. You can just sync it all through Dropbox. And I really like that because it's just so much faster and easier for me. And it also gives you the benefits of Dropbox, like file rollbacks and redundancy and recovery and all those kinds of things. Okay, so that's, to me, that is probably worth the entire price of Launchpal just to save not having to use FTP. Okay, so click Next. Now you want to add a domain. You can see here that it says you should put your DNS to ns1.dnsimple.com, and so on and so on. These are name servers. So what I'm going to do is import my domain and change these name servers. So let's take this here. It's just ns1234. Copy that. Go to my domain. I want to change this to custom DNS, and I'm going to put in these name servers. All right, ns2, ns3, ns4, and tick. Okay, so that can take a while to propagate, depending on luck, whether the domain's new, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to import my domain here. What is that domain? xenotestdomain.online. Import. There we go. So when you're rolling out new projects with Launchpal, you'll get to assign a domain to that actual project, and you can click here to add a subdomain. I'm just going to assign this main domain. There we go. And next. You can also skip that section if you want to, and you can use your own, at least for the landing page server, you can just use Cloudflare and point your DNS entries directly to the actual server IP. But for the various apps and so on that they're rolling out, I would recommend using actually attaching a domain properly so that Launchpal can actually do the changes it needs to do to make sure that everything works. Okay, so now this job is running, as you can see. If I go to Vultr and I refresh, I should see this server deploying. There you go, you can see this installing, so this might take a couple of minutes. It's usually pretty quick. And in Launchpal, if I click this little button here, it'll open the project in a new tab, and if I click the actual project itself, it'll show me the project details. So you can see I can't really do anything yet until this actually deploys, so I'll wait for this and I'll time skip to once it's done. Okay, so that's now successfully deployed. If I go back to Launchpal, I can see that I now have all these tabs available. So if I click on App, you can see here it shows my install path. It shows me the database name, username, and password for FunnelFlux that I'm going to need during the installation. Monitoring, that shows you various graphs, so you can just view lots of stuff in here. File sync, you've got Dropbox set up. Jobs, shows you a list of jobs that we're running. Backups lets you actually configure the backups for your servers here as well. Access lets you actually see your server SSH details, root password directly through here as well. Power lets you restart, destroy lets you kill. So you can do a lot of stuff from within Launchpal. Another really useful thing is that you can actually migrate and move things as well with Launchpal. So you can actually change server and move it to another provider on a different size. This is not something that you'd be able to do if you were just using Vultr or DigitalOcean, for example. Like if you want to move your application from DigitalOcean to Vultr, you're going to need a sysadmin to do that. So if you're ever thinking that might happen, Launchpal makes this easy, and it lets you kind of move onto a resized virtual private server, which is really cool. It makes a lot of this stuff easy. One thing to note here, if you do launch with Launchpal, they're your go-to people in terms of support for technical and server support. So if you have issues with using FunnelFlux, reach out to us. But if you have issues with your server, like high CPU and RAM usage, or not being able to actually contact the server, or it seems down or something like that, talk to the Launchpal support people, because their way of provisioning the actual systems and deploying the applications is different from the normal kind of process that we use. So they know those environments the best, and they're the ones who are best fit to respond to those concerns for you. Okay, so now that this is done, and I've set up this actual domain to point to these name servers, I can see my actual virtual machine here. I always like to jump in and have a quick look. Okay, now what I want to do is actually go through the FunnelFlux installation, right? So I'm going to need this license key and my email address here. I'm going to go back to projects, and I'm going to click this to launch. You can see here that it actually launches on this IP. we actually want to open this domain, right? Because when I'm doing the installation process, the license that I use here, it's going to attach to whatever domain I'm actually running the install on, which in this case is an IP. It's fine to use an IP as well. The limitation here is that licensed domain or IP, that is the URL through which you need to log in to use your dashboard. If you have other things pointing to FunnelFlux, like domains and subdomains and aliases and so on, they'll all work for tracking and for conversion tracking and redirects and so on. But for logging in to your dashboard, you need to use the actual licensed domain. So I'm going to try and actually load via this domain here and see if it works. I'm not sure if it will because of the fact that the domain may have not transitioned just yet, but we'll check it out and see what happens. License number, let's take this guy. Email address. Okay, recall that the user name and password are all just Flux. Right, and lastly, select your login details, Zeno123ABC. For your production server and system, of course, use a better password, and I'd recommend not using your admin as the default. Just makes it easy for people to try and brute force tempt their way into their into just any login for any system, right? Okay, and click create, and that finishes everything. So click here to log in, and we're done. Okay, so Zeno123ABC. If I refresh here, you should see that it's attached to that domain now. There you go, done. And if I go back here, there we go, server is set up. So the first thing I would do is go to System Updates and update to the latest if available. Nothing's available just yet. I can see I'm on version 1.6050. It might just take a while for the updates to actually download to the system, but once they do, or once that actually triggers, you'll be able to run an update here. So keep an eye out for that because it's much easier to do that stuff early. Okay, there you go. So that triggered just as I was about to end the video. So if I go here, install the latest, and then I'll check the footer of the actual tracker to make sure that it is updated. Okay, so that update finished and I refreshed, and you can see here version 1.6074. So we are all good to go. So that's essentially everything in terms of deploying on Launchpal. Again, lots of useful features if you want to use this to actually launch your applications. One of my favorite is, again, just launching an actual landing page server. It's so simple and easy to just deploy a very quick, tiny server. It doesn't need to be small, it doesn't need to be big at all for hosting some landing pages. You set it to sync with Dropbox. You can then use a subdomain like landers.zenotestdomain.com. Away you go. Set up your project. It'll take like a very small amount of time to actually set up, and then you will have it in Dropbox to paste your landers in, and away you go. So yeah, that's everything for this video. I'll see you in the next one.